So, hey everyone, first of all, I'm Laura from Datacove, and we've got Sophie here as well. It's absolutely lovely to see everyone here. Today we're kind of doing a bit of a seminar, which is a bit of a different thing for us. Obviously, normally we have meetups where people come and give some talks, so we thought we'd kind of make these available online as well for access and just kind of do some knowledge shares effectively. So the one I'm going to do today is all about segmentation. And I'm going to take you through kind of what it is, how we've used it before, and kind of all the possible reasons you can use it as well. I'm even going to show you some code. So that's going to be fun. And I've looked up the R code. So R people, I will show you some R code. No guarantee that it's perfectly correct, but it looks general gist. But yeah. So the way I'm going to approach this, first of all, is customer segmentation, primarily because that's kind of what we do a lot for our clients. So I'm going to come at it from that point of view. However, there's a lot of different ways that you can use segmentation, but just as a first kind of example. So customer segmentation, we know that everyone doesn't feel the same, doesn't react the same, doesn't interact with content the same. So why would you send out similar content to everyone? So if you think when you get emails, are your emails a complete blanket email from a brand? You know, they're saying, look, this is what we have. Here are our products. There you go. And sometimes you might feel like, do you know what? It doesn't resonate with me, or that's completely pointless. I only went on to buy this little thing. Why are you trying to advertise this to me? Whereas with customer segmentation, what we can do is uncover what makes our customers unique and better understand how they interact with the brand. Now, this may seem a little bit intrusive, but we will look at people's possibly demographics and kind of purchasing patterns, online behaviors and interests to try and identify distinct groups of customers that we call segments. And each segment will kind of interact slightly differently. And then you can tailor your marketing depending on your segment. And that means that people are getting a lot more relevant things sent to them. And customers feel more valued and heard. And actually, in turn, it increases their engagement with the brand. So a lot of our clients come to us asking for help with their customer segmentation because they want to interact and work with their customers better. And we have noticed that it does make a big difference. So there's quite a few benefits of customer segmentation. Obviously, the personalized marketing. If you can understand how people uniquely interact with your brand, you can then target specific people with certain campaigns that actually resonate to them, so leading to higher engagement and better conversion rates, thereby getting an improved customer experience. So yes, it works good for the brand, but it also works better for the customers as well. They feel they've been heard, they're listened to, how they're interacting with the brand actually makes sense to them, and then the advertising links to kind of their relationship with the brand. This usually increases satisfaction and loyalty, which leads to an increased retention and lifetime value. You can use it for other things as well, though. You can look at optimizing your resource allocation. So if you know that certain customers are going to be buying in certain types of products a lot more, you can start prepping that ahead of time, especially in the lead up to Christmas. This is quite a big issue now. There's going to be brands out there that have been planning for Christmas probably since spring, and they will have been looking at kind of what people buy in certain trends or seasonality, and how can we help optimize that resource allocation in time for Christmas and things like that. Which again is good for customers because then they don't run out of the things that we are looking to buy, and these are things that are possibly just one-offs as for Christmas presents, etc. It can also help with better product development. If you're noticing that certain segments are interacting with certain products a lot more, and other products are being completely ignored, not only can you think about kind of your resource allocation, but you can maybe start developing products like, oh, people are really loving this, but I'm getting this as feedback, so actually this maybe could be developed a little bit better. And obviously the better services and products that you can make supports your customers a lot better. And the last one Obviously, it gives a bit of a competitive advantage. If you are able to stay ahead of the curve and anticipating these changing market trends and adapting your strategies accordingly, you can really get that competitive edge against your competitors and build up a business. Okay, so that's kind of it in a bit of a nutshell based on customer segmentation, but you can segment on lots of different things as well. And we always say, customer segmentation basically pays for itself, because if your marketing ROI really does come back, and we've got some proof of that. So we worked with a client. These guys were a global e-commerce brand. We can't mention names, but they got quite a few customers. They are globally selling these very fancy outfits, quite high-end clothes and stuff. And we did some segmentation, but we used hierarchical clustering and some modern random forest modeling. We'll talk about kind of the different types of segmentation that you can do later, but we did lots of segmenting, and we were able to spot that there were like 4 different groups of people that interacted with their brand. So we had your high-end shoppers, and they had certain traits that they shared amongst each other, like they spent a lot, bought frequently, always were buying the latest trends, highly engaged and very loyal to the brand. Then we had socially influenced shoppers. We were able to tell that these people spent a lot of time on social media. They were following the trends. However, they didn't have the money to actually buy, just like the high value shoppers. So they took a little bit longer to decide. They did spend less, but they really were influenced by peer recommendations and social medias. And then we had the discount seekers. So their traits were they only bought during sales and special occasions. They're obviously just looking for deals and discounts. That's definitely the type of shopper I am. I hate spending money, so I always look for the sales. And they will only engage with a brand primarily during promotions. And then we had the disengaged customers, the customers who maybe have had a bad experience or are only coming on to do a single purchase and then never came back. Now, imagine you sending out an email campaign as one whole thing to your customers. That's not going to hit well on the majority of people. You know, if you're trying to sell the latest brand and a really expensive thing, yeah, your high value shoppers and maybe your socially influenced shoppers might like that. Your discount seekers and your disengaged customers are not going to be interested in that. Versus you're like, oh, we've got a sale coming on. You'll obviously send that out to the discount seekers, and that'll really work for them, possibly even the disengaged customers, to try and get them back in. But you don't want your high value customers knowing there's a sale. I mean, maybe not knowing there's a sale, but you don't want to encourage them to be buying sales stuff. They want the latest trends. They want the best of the best. So it really is beneficial, even for this kind of snapshot of an example, to segment your marketing and do so to engage with your customers better. And I've just seen our Jeremy has joined us. Would you like to say hi, Jeremy? Oh, he's not even listening. Never mind. We'll come back to him in a bit. So this was a real business that we worked with. They were really, really pleased when we kind of came up and said, look, here are your kind of 4, if not 5 groups. I think we had a 5th one as well. And they completely changed their marketing campaign. Instead of just sending out one email to everyone, they started sending out kind of groups of emails to groups of people. And within, I think it was 4 to 6 months, they saw a 20% sales lift, which was quite excellent. And they were very, very pleased. So these things do have an impact. They really do support kind of things in business, and it is a very doable and achievable way to really increase engagement. Yeah. Before we go on, we're going to have a little chat. So when might you have been segmented as a customer? So I just gave you a kind of a very customer related one. So that was a fashion brand, but have a little think from you as a customer. When do you think you might have been targeted with either a segmented email, or when do you suspect that you're maybe shown certain things versus will be the next person? And have you been segmented as a customer? I will leave the floor open. Fiona. Hi.
Yeah, I can think of two clear examples. So it was particularly notable because there's a very famous sort of conference that happens in London called Learning Technologies, which is for all people who are sort of engaged in learning and tech, obviously enough. And it used to be, I've been going for many years, but as soon as I got the title director, suddenly the story changed in terms of my marketing, and that's because you suddenly own a budget. So now I get personalized phone calls and certain kinds of emails that I never used to get.
Oh, that's a really, really excellent one. And actually, one of my clients is an events company, and I did some segmenting who's a VIP or not. So yes, as soon as you get director in your title, you're automatically put in the VIP section. So that's why you're going to have a little bit more. Not that I'm sure I wasn't involved in that at all, Fiona, but I can see where that maybe came from. Maddie, how are you?
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking actually, it's just more a daily example. When I go to shopping at the Co-op, I use my loyalty card, and I noticed when I open my app, among my discounted items, the items I can use discount for, every time they try to keep the theme of my last purchase. So obviously they're looking what I buy, and they look how much I want to spend. I was not aware really. I know it's very naive, but I started to notice very recently, actually. I thought it was just a way to collect points, but it's not, I think. I'm tracked.
You are so valuable as a customer. And in fact, a lot of the time, companies will offer a lot of discounts if you just sign up to their mailing list, or if you fill in this form, because your data is actually a goldmine. As Jeremy will always say, data is the new oil, isn't it? Speaking of which, hi Jeremy, are you now with us?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, my headset wasn't working before. You were very loud. The whole of platform 9 heard. But
Sorry.
no, that's fine. Yes, I'm here. Data is the new oil, or indeed the new soil, as I like to say sometimes. So with data, if you think about what soil does for plants, with data it brings growth. So data is the new soil, slightly more than oil. Sorry, I should go and be quiet now and leave you to it.
So yeah, this will happen loads, whether it's in your emails or how you're being interacted with companies and how you're being targeted and spoken to, but also even just like, if you go on to, as Maddie was saying, your online shop, you will notice that you get targeted offers usually. So a lot of companies are using, if you sign up for their loyalty card, you also get perks and bonuses, but that's because they're collecting all that data from you, so it's worth their while to give you free stuff or discounted stuff. But also like Netflix or streaming shows, there's other things available, but you go on there, and I know I've got a profile, and as does my husband, and I must say we are recommended hugely different movies. His is all war and typical fast cars and guns and all that there, and mine is a lot of like Pride and Prejudice stuff, I must say. So, musicals as well. So yeah, and I think that's really good, because if we shared one and we just had a family one, I would get all these recommendations of his movies that I wouldn't enjoy, and he would also get my recommendations. So for me, I'm like, do you know what, it's worth selling a little bit of my data and my soul just so I get it much easier to watch a movie that I want to see. So I don't know, it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Sometimes it's good. Other things, any music you listen to, you're probably being segmented. If you've ever used Amazon, you're definitely being segmented. So most online resources will now be doing this. Cool. So how do we even get started with customer segmentation? Again, I'm going to keep with the customer theme, and then later on I'm going to showcase other things you can do with it, so don't worry. So obviously the first thing you need to do is decide what your business objective is. There's a lot of different ways you can go about this, but once you have decided kind of what you're looking for and what your output wants to be, then you got to start collecting that data. Now that will come from loads of different places, whether your CRM, so your customer relationship management resource, including your demographics, or whether that comes from transactional purchases, browsing behaviors, or any kind of digital behaviors, or feedback or loyalty from the brand. So we'll collect all that information. And then we're going to see if we can identify those segments. So we can analyze the data to find some common characteristics among your customers, or more likely, and what we're going to look at later on, is there's a lot of, now when I say an AI model, I mean the traditional AI model, not our AI assistants. I mean actual machine learning models. So they will, you kind of give them the data, they will discover patterns that people really maybe wouldn't spot. So there's a lot of different models that we're going to go through later, and that helps us identify segments based on characteristics. And then what we do is we group our segments together. We determine that criteria that creates that group, like what's special about this group. So just like the example I showed you earlier, are they our high worth value customers, or are they only interacting during a sale, or they've got this characteristic, they all live in London or whatever it is. So maybe you could target them that way. So this can be based on lots of different things. Or as I say, if you're doing an unsupervised model, it will kind of give you the engineered features that actually work best for them. So one we're going to look at later is k-means clustering. So that's kind of nice. You see how it actually groups the customers for you based on certain things. Now, obviously, after that, you've got to start developing some strategies. There's no point having this information and then doing nothing with it. So once you have your different segments, you've got to be able to decide what to do with them. So we'll group them, and they've all got kind of similar characteristics as each other. So now how do you personalize either your recommendations or your products or your offers? And you want to make sure then you are using that information to actually go away and target. And then the last thing, you cannot forget, you've got to remember, you've got to measure this and you've got to repeat this, especially customer segmentation. It's very much an ongoing process. What works 1 year or even 6 months or even 3 months is not always going to work that much down the line again. So it is always important to review, to adapt, and to evolve. So segmentation models, we would suggest to repeat from 3 to 6 monthly time periods, so you can actually see and spot, because people change their minds, and that's okay. So, okay, is there any questions with that, or are we happy enough to pop on to segmentation models and the different sorts of things we can do?
I had a bit of a question.
Sure.
So how does the feedback loop work? Like, would you start with knowing what you want to target for and then design the grouping around that? Or would you find what groups you have and then see what you could do with them? Like, how does that typically go as a cycle?
That's a lovely question, Fiona, and that leads quite nicely into the type of methods you can do.
There we go.
Yeah, there is lots of different ways that you can kind of approach it. You can do a rules-based one. So I kind of get the impression from what you're saying is that you've got, like, I would like 4 different groups. And I've had some clients come to me and they say, look, I have this many groups. Can you take my customers and put them in the correct groups? And sometimes we can do that with a machine learning algorithm. However, actually, if it is just rules-based and you want to go, do you know what, anyone that has, like the other Fiona said, I'm a director, I'm in this group, or I've got a budget, I'm in this group, we would actually recommend a rules-based model for that. That way you don't even have to go into machine learning. It is the simplest way of segmenting, and it is very common use, especially if people are not overly technical in machine learning, because you can just go around and say, well, if this, then this. So if they've got this as a title, put them in the VIP section. Or if they earn more than they go into this, or if they live in a certain area, then this. And that way you can add lots of different columns that are like flagged and stuff, and create your own segmentation groups. So if you have in your mind the outputs that you want, I would recommend either a rules-based or if you want it to be unsupervised, a k-means, because then you can define, I want 3 segments or I want 5 segments. So in a k-means model, you actually choose the number of groups that you have, and then the model works and fits it into those group numbers. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. If you might be going on to this on the next slide, like if you don't know how many groups you have, how would you know where to stop with the k-means?
We are going to go over that, don't you worry. These are great questions. I love it. There is a thing, well, there's a couple of things you can do. The most common is called an elbow method, and we kind of look at what the recommended, using the model, what the recommended number of K values are. So you can kind of just say to the data and go, look, here's my data. Can you spot some recommendations? You know, can you spot kind of what the best group is? And it kind of, yeah, it's called an elbow method, and it kind of goes, oh, well, it's 2 here and it's 3 here and it's 4 here, and it kind of draws you a line graph, but at one point in the graph, it, instead of a lovely curve, it has like a real big elbow, and at that point your elbow, that's either, you know, when K is 3 or when K is 4 or 5, and that kind of gives a good recommendation. However, I would always say run with that and see what it's like, but then run it one above and one below and see if it really makes sense. So k-means would be the most common for clustering algorithm that you, especially for unsupervised learning, but you do have to decide what the K is. So there's a number of different ways, and sometimes you just have to play along with it until it works. There is also, no, you're welcome. There is also hierarchical clustering, and that's from the example I showed you earlier. Now that's best for the small data sets, and it actually provides what's called a dendrogram for visualizations. Basically, it just looks like a tree with lots of branches kind of coming off and breaking off. We'll see. I should have put a picture in, but it kind of looks like this actually, but lots of them. And you can actually then decide the best number of clusters using the picture as well, that dendrogram. So that's kind of another way that you can maybe do a hierarchical clustering into a k-means and support the best way of finding your k value there.
With the hierarchical, you say a small data set, like give me an order of magnitude when you say small. Or is it a very shot call vibe thing?
I think you just, after a while, if you have too much data, it's too much. Because what it does is it starts with 1 and then breaks it into 2. You know, well, these 2 are different, so I'm going to keep them apart. And then these ones are, I'm going to break it and break it and break it and break it almost until you go. Whereas k-means, it's like, oh, I've got one and I want to join it together until I, so there's kind of like opposite ways of doing it, sort of thing. But Jeremy might have a specific number in mind. In fact, no, do you know what? I'm going to show you something in a second. I'll give you some resources that you can then look into.
Thank you.
Those are good questions. Right, good.
I'm going to say, you want me to write down a number and hold it up at the end and see if it matches anything that you said. I haven't seen these slides, so, you know.
He has no idea.
New to me.
But no, there is a really good place on Scikit-learn's website that you can say, how do I choose the best model? They call it something else. How do I choose the best thing? And then it kind of does like a little flow diagram. If I have, you know, supervised or unsupervised, or if I have more than 50,000 or less than 50,000, if I have this or that. So I'll show you that, and then it kind of, it's really helpful, that one. The last one I'm going to talk about, and I'm sure there is more, but this one would kind of be if you're doing probability based segmentation, and it's a Gaussian mixture model, so GMM. The only difference between the GMM and a k-means is that your clusters can have a different shape, variance and size, and the method can outperform k-means in much more complex data. But k-means pretty much is the one you kind of go for, or hierarchical random forest clustering. So those 2 are the kind of main ones if you were doing machine learning, and if you're not, then the rules-based, it works perfectly fine. Cool. All right. Nice one. But yes, that's a lovely, I will show you that before the end. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is actually, I think most people are coming from R or a Python meetup. So I thought we'd actually look at some common libraries. So Sophie, we can share all these slides after, can't we? So don't feel you have to take notes and stuff. But here are some common libraries if you're doing different types of clustering. Now, I can only really talk about the Python one, unfortunately. So I know we use pandas and NumPy just for our basic core data handling. And then scikit-learn is the library that has kind of everything included. So whether it be k-means, we obviously might have to scale sometimes, or Gaussian mixture, or some algo-merative clusterings for hierarchical. So there's loads of different things, but it's all contained within scikit-learn. And then we would plot with matplotlib or Seaborn to kind of visualize the things. I'm hoping this is correct for R. Now Jeremy's looking at me, but I know tidyverse is obviously how you wrangle your data and you can use for plotting. But for clustering and visualizations, I'm hoping it's all about cluster, facto extra, and mbclust for these different types of things.
You've put three of my favorite packages on this list. I promise you I haven't seen the slides as well. So from a data handling perspective in R, and you can probably even get some of the way we're starting to build basic models with some cleaning and some of the other packages within the tidyverse. That's a really good place to start. And then if you're thinking of kind of basic clusters and visuals, then the packages that you put in there are a really good place to start. But my two favorite packages on this list, apart from tidyverse because it's awesome, mclust, love it, been using it for a long time, built some of my first and best cluster models in that package. And because it's this Gaussian mixture model, you're not defining too much of the cluster up front, and that's why I really like it, because there's no bias going into that model. We've used it recently, in fact, on another cluster problem or challenge that we've had to solve, and that way it comes out and it tells you what it thinks the best grouping or the best way to segment these individuals is. And Carrot's great. I think that was one. Let's not talk about what year I discovered Carrot. I discovered that a long time ago, and very, very useful in terms of being able to transform your data and cluster alongside some of the tidyverse packages as well. So a good solid list for a non-R person. Very impressive.
Google is amazing, isn't it? What is the R equivalent of this? Good. I'm glad all that made sense and wasn't nonsense. I probably should have checked it with you first, but you know what? This is how we live. Cool. All right. So I thought we would look at some k-means, if that's all right. I'm going to discuss it a little bit further and all the other things that we can do with it. So k-means is probably one of the most common unsupervised machine learning algorithms because it's quite easy to access, it's quite easy to set up. You do have to kind of do a little bit of pre-processing first and make some decisions, so it is slightly biased, as Jeremy says, but it's got loads of different applications. So you can do, it doesn't have to be customer segmentation, you can do image segmentation, species clustering, anomaly detection, you can cluster languages, there's all sorts of different things. But k-means is quite good because what you're doing is you're trying to find groups that kind of go together, and it's all about kind of the distance from a data point. So you've got some observations here, and what we're going to do is we're going to cluster them in a centroid, i.e. a data point in the center of a cluster. So it's an iterative program and algorithm, so it kind of finds two things that are close together and puts them in a group, and then finds another things that are close together, and you're kind of grouping all these things that are super close together until you get your kind of finished groups.